My son's future mother-in-law stood up in the middle of a restaurant full of people and told everyone at the table that I was the reason her daughter deserved better. Before I could even set down my fork, my son pushed back his chair, looked at his fiancée, and saw her smiling into her wine glass. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. He simply placed his napkin on the table and said, "We're done here." And what he found inside my house later that same night exposed a plan so calculated, so cold, that I still have to remind myself it was real every time I think about it. The question I could not stop asking myself was this: how long had they been smiling at me while building a cage around everything I had left? My name is Dorothy Callahan. I am 63 years old. I taught 4th grade for 27 years at the same elementary school where my son once learned to read. I am not a dramatic woman. I do not like conflict. My late husband, George, used to say I would apologize to a door if I bumped into it, and he was not entirely wrong. George passed away 4 years ago from a stroke that came without any warning on a Tuesday morning while he was drinking his coffee and reading the newspaper. One moment he was there. The next, he was not. After that, the house became the most important thing I had, not because of what it was worth, but because of what it held. George had painted every room himself. His tools still hung in the garage in exactly the order he arranged them. The oak rocking chair on the front porch was the one he sat in every Sunday evening watching the neighborhood settle down for the night. When my son brought his girlfriend home for the first time, I told myself I would love her. He was 34 years old and happier than I had seen him in years. She was polished and smart, and moved through a room like someone who had always been told she was the most interesting person in it. I didn't hold that against her. I tried to see what my son saw. I made my best pot roast. I brought out the good dishes. I lit candles on the dining room table the way I used to do when George was alive. She looked at my house the way people look at something they are deciding whether to keep or throw away. She was kind about it. She said things like, "It has real character, and I love how lived in it feels." Her mother, who came along uninvited on the second visit, was less careful. She walked through my living room running one manicured finger along the mantel and said, "Isn't it something, how some people hold on to things long past their time?" She said it with a smile. She always said everything with a smile. Her mother was the kind of woman who had made an entire identity out of appearing superior. She wore her money the way some people wear armor, loudly, completely, without apology. Her hair was always done. Her clothing was always new. She had opinions about everything and stated them as though they were facts delivered from a great height. Her husband was a quiet man who responded to her with nods and silence, so consistent it seemed like he had simply stopped trying a long time ago. I told myself these things did not bother me. That was my first mistake. The small moments added up the way drops of water add up until something is soaked through. At my son's birthday dinner at my house, she commented twice that the neighborhood had really changed. When I showed her the garden George had planted along the back fence, she said, "You know, raised beds are actually much more practical for someone your age." When I made a carrot cake from scratch for my son, the same one I had made every year since he was 7, she picked up a slice, examined it, and said, "I didn't realize people still baked from scratch." How nostalgic. My son was always in the other room, on the phone, getting something from the car, helping with the dishes. He never heard any of it, and I never told him, because every time I almost did, I thought about how his face looked when he talked about her. That open, unguarded happiness that reminded me of when he was a little boy showing me a drawing he was proud of. I did not want to be the one who touched that and left a mark. So I smiled and I swallowed it and I told myself it was nothing. There were 2 things I should have paid more attention to. The first was the way his fiancée watched her mother whenever she said something cruel. Not with discomfort, not with embarrassment, with a small, private satisfaction, like someone watching a chess piece move exactly where they wanted it to go. The second was a comment her mother made at Easter, when she picked up George's old wristwatch that sits on the mantel beside his photograph. She turned it over in her hands and said to no one in particular, "Property like this, all this history, someone should really make sure it's protected properly before something happens." I thought it was a strange thing to say. I did not understand it then. The engagement party was held at a restaurant my son had chosen because it was his fiancée's favorite. Round tables, white tablecloths, candles in glass holders, the kind of place where the menu doesn't have prices. I wore the blue dress I had bought for my daughter-in-law's shower, and the pearl bracelet George gave me on our 30th anniversary. I ironed my dress the night before. I practiced what I was going to say in my toast twice while standing at the bathroom mirror like a woman preparing for something more serious than a party. I was the first to arrive. The table filled slowly. Her parents, 2 of her aunts, several of her friends, a couple my son worked with. I sat between my son and an empty seat that was eventually claimed by one of her college roommates, who talked about herself for 40 minutes straight. The food was good. The wine was poured liberally. For the first hour, I told myself it was going fine. It was not fine. I could feel it in the way her mother kept redirecting every conversation back to her daughter's accomplishments, her daughter's taste, her daughter's vision for the future. I was not mentioned once in the first hour, except when her mother asked me with enormous sweetness if I had found the restaurant okay, since she imagined I didn't get downtown much. My son squeezed my hand under the table when she said it. He heard that one. The moment it all broke happened over something small, as these moments often do. The waiter brought a second bread basket. I reached for a piece at the same time as her mother, and she pulled her hand back and said brightly, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Oh, please. Dorothy needs it more than I do. She's always seemed like a woman who finds comfort in carbohydrates." The table went quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when something has been said that cannot be unsaid and everyone knows it. I felt heat move from my chest up to my face. My hand was still holding the bread. I set it down. I heard a few small laughs from the direction of her college friends, the kind of nervous sounds that happen when people don't know whether they should laugh or not. And then I heard my son's fiancée. She laughed. Not nervously, not to cover anything up. A real, clear, genuine laugh, brief, but real. My son turned his head slowly and looked at her. The smile was still on her face when she realized he was looking at her. Something moved across her expression, not guilt, not quite, more like calculation. She started to rearrange her face, but she was a moment too late. My son stood up. He did not raise his voice. He did not point at anyone or knock anything over. He simply stood up, looked at his fiancée for a long moment, then looked at her mother, and then he said very quietly, "We're done here. Mum, get your coat." Her mother laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. "Surely you're not being serious." He didn't answer her. He held out his hand to me. I took it. My legs felt strange when I stood, like they belonged to someone else. I could feel every eye in that room on me. I could hear the low hum of voices starting around us. His fiancée grabbed his arm. Her voice went soft and urgent. "You're making a scene. Sit down." My mother was joking. He looked at her hand on his arm and then at her face. "She wasn't joking. And you laughed. It was just, I asked you last month about how she talked to my mother. You told me I was imagining things." His voice had not gotten louder, but something in it had shifted. "You weren't confused about what was happening. You knew." I did not fully understand what he meant by that yet. Outside, the night air hit my face like cold water. I stood on the sidewalk holding my purse and my bracelet and my 63 years of life while inside that restaurant. Raised voices were beginning behind a closed door. My son came out 2 minutes later. His jacket was still on, his face completely still. "Are you all right?" I asked. "I will be," he said. "Mum, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly." I looked at him. His face reminded me of George at the end of an argument when he had reached a decision. Solid. Arrived somewhere. "Has she ever asked you about the house? About what would happen to it, legally, after we got married?" My blood went cold. I thought about the comment at Easter. The way her mother had turned the watch over in her hands. The phrase property, like this. All this history. Her mother said something once, I said, about protecting it properly. He closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then he opened them and pulled his phone out and dialed someone. While it rang, he looked at me and said, "My colleague at work is a property attorney. I called him 2 weeks ago because I found something in her email. I didn't want to believe it. I needed time to look into it more." "What did you find?" A voice answered on the other end before he could answer me. My son turned slightly away and spoke in a low, quick voice, and after 30 seconds he said, "Yes, tonight. I know it's late. I'm sorry. It can't wait." He ended the call and looked at me. "We need to go to your house right now." I did not ask any more questions on the drive. The city lights moved past the windows, and I watched them without seeing them. My son drove with both hands on the wheel and his jaw set in that way he had gotten from his father, tight but controlled, the way George looked when he was carrying something heavy and refusing to put it down until he reached the right place. My neighbour's porch light was on when we turned onto my street. Everything else looked ordinary. Quiet lawns, still trees, the yellow glow of television sets behind curtains. Normal, safe. My son pulled into the driveway and stopped. He looked at my front door. "Did you leave the hall light on?" "I hadn't." We sat very still for a moment. "Stay close to me," he said. He unlocked the front door with his key. The hallway light was on. The umbrella stand was in place. The bowl of keys on the entry table was undisturbed. For a moment, everything looked exactly as I had left it. Then I saw the door to George's study standing open. I always kept it closed. Not locked, just closed. It was the room where I felt closest to him, where his books still lined the shelves in the order he arranged them, where his reading glasses still sat folded on the corner of the desk, exactly where he left them the last morning he used them. My son reached the study doorway first and stopped. I came up beside him. The room looked almost untouched. That was the thing that disturbed me most. Whoever had been in here had not ransacked the place. They had been careful, deliberate. The desk drawer was closed, but not fully flush with the frame. I crossed the room and pulled it open all the way. The green folder was gone. George and I had kept one green folder in that drawer for 30 years. It held the deed to the house, our mortgage payoff certificate, his life insurance policy, my beneficiary documents, and the property survey from when we first bought the land. It was the folder that proved, in clear legal language, that this house belonged to me completely and to no one else. I stood there with my hand on the open drawer and heard my own breathing. "It's not here," I said. My son checked the other drawers without speaking. Then he crossed to the bookshelf. George had kept a small carved wooden box on the second shelf, a box his own father had made by hand, painted with a simple blue flower, the kind of thing that looks unremarkable to anyone who doesn't know the story behind it. His father had given it to him the day he graduated from trade school. George had kept a folded note inside it from the day our son was born. Nothing valuable. Everything meaningful. The shelf was bare where the box had been. My son turned slowly and looked at the empty space. His face did not collapse. It hardened. "They were here," he said. He pulled out his phone and called his attorney friend back. While he talked, I sat down in George's reading chair and held my own hands together and tried to stay calm. I looked at the empty shelf and thought about that wooden box and the note inside it, and I felt a grief that was different from the grief of losing someone. This was the grief of violation, of having something private and irreplaceable treated as if it were simply an obstacle in someone else's plan. By the time my son ended the call, there was a car pulling up outside. His friend arrived with a briefcase and the careful face of someone who was about to say things that were difficult but necessary. He sat across from us at the kitchen table and opened a folder of printed documents. My son had sent him digital copies 2 weeks earlier. "I want you to look at these," his friend said, and he pushed the papers toward me. At the top of the first page was my name, my address, and beneath it, language I had to read 3 times before my mind would accept what it said: a proposed transfer of residential property into a jointly managed trust. The listed trustees were my son's fiancée and her mother. My hands went perfectly still on the table. "I never signed anything like this," I said. "I know," my son's friend said quietly. "Look at the bottom." I looked. My signature was there, or something close to it. The D in Dorothy curled the wrong direction. The C in Callahan broke where mine never broke. It was my name wearing someone else's handwriting. My son said nothing for a very long time. Then he turned a page, and another. There were printed emails. One between his fiancée and her mother discussing the timeline. One between her mother and a notary who had apparently agreed to assist with verification. Her mother had written, "Once the marriage is official, the mother has no male advocate to push back. These things go quietly when the woman is older and alone." My son slid that page face down on the table. I did not need to read further. I had understood enough. "How long have they been planning this?" I asked. His friend looked at my son. My son answered, "Since before the engagement. Her mother's business has been failing for over a year. I found out 2 weeks ago when I was looking for an insurance document in her files and found a folder I wasn't meant to find. I confronted her, and she told me her mother had just been thinking ahead about estate planning. She seemed sorry. I wanted to believe it was less than it was. He looked at the table. I should have trusted what I saw. I thought about all the months of small humiliations, the comments about my neighborhood, the remark about my baking, the bread at the restaurant. I had never once considered that beneath all that contempt there was something organized, something working. I had assumed cruelty was its own motive. I did not understand it was also a tactic designed to make me feel small so that when the papers arrived, I might not feel entitled to refuse. We heard a car outside before anyone knocked. My son stood. His attorney friend stood. I stayed seated because my legs were not entirely trustworthy at that moment. The knock came hard. 3 quick raps. My son opened the door. His fiancée stood on the porch in her dinner clothes, her hair slightly undone. Her expression caught somewhere between apology and demand. Her mother stood 1 step behind her. Silver jacket, bright earrings, the same composure she wore everywhere, though something around her eyes was tighter than usual. "You need to come back to the restaurant," his fiancée said. "People are still there. This is embarrassing." "You're at my mother's house," my son said, "at 9 o'clock at night. Where do you think the green folder is?" The porch went silent. Her mother lifted her chin. "I don't know what folder you're referring to." "The one from the study desk," I said from behind my son. Both women looked past him and saw me standing in the hallway. Her mother blinked once. That was the only sign she gave that anything had shifted. His fiancée turned to her mother. "Mum, don't," her mother said, short and sharp and certain. "There's a forged signature on a property transfer document," my son said. "My mother's name, not her signature." Her mother smiled, the smile she always used when she was about to reframe a situation. "That document was a draft. For discussion purposes. Nothing was finalized. You are catastrophizing." "Harold," my son said, and his attorney friend stepped into view from the kitchen doorway. Whatever composure her mother had been maintaining cracked slightly around the edges. She recognized the name, or the briefcase, or the expression on Harold's face, which was professional and entirely unsympathetic. "There's also a carved wooden box missing from the study shelf," my son said. "It belonged to my grandfather." His fiancée looked at her mother. "What wooden box?" Her mother did not answer. "Mom." Her voice changed. "What did you take?" "I was safeguarding documents," her mother said. "Everything in that house is going to become complicated the moment the marriage is official." I was being practical. "You were in my house," I said. She looked at me directly for the first time. Her expression was patient in the way a person is patient when they believe they are speaking to someone who does not fully understand how the world works. "Dorothy," she said, "you are a retired schoolteacher living alone in a house that is worth considerably more than you realize. You have no financial advisor, no updated estate plan, no one looking after your interests, at your age. In this situation, someone has to think ahead." "Someone was," I said. "Her name is me." She smiled thinly. "Where is the box?" my son asked. She said nothing. His fiancée looked at her mother's oversized bag sitting on the porch railing where she had set it when she knocked. Something moved across her face. Not guilt exactly. Recognition. My son stepped forward and picked up the bag. His fiancée didn't stop him. He unzipped it and reached inside. He pulled out my green folder. And wrapped inside one of her mother's scarves, he found George's wooden box. The painted blue flower on the lid caught the porch light for a moment, and I felt something break open in my chest, some tightly held thing releasing all at once. I made a sound I had not intended to make. My son looked at me, then looked at his fiancée, and I watched something finalize in his face. The last version of his hope for something different. Gone. "You knew she had access to this house," he said to her. It was not a question. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then said, very quietly, "She told me she was going to look at some paperwork. I didn't know she was going to take anything. Did you know about the transfer documents?" A pause that lasted 1 second too long. She said it was just planning. "It's fraud," Harold said from the doorway, and the word landed on that porch like something dropped from a significant height. Her mother turned toward him. "Watch your language." Nothing was filed. "An attempt was made," Harold said. "I've already confirmed that with the county recorder's office." There was a sound from the end of the driveway. My neighbour from 3 houses down had walked his dog past my yard every evening for 11 years. He had stopped at the edge of my grass and was watching the porch with the expression of a man who was simultaneously trying to be polite and unable to look away. 2 minutes later, a police cruiser turned slowly onto the street. My son looked at Harold. Harold gave a small nod. He had made a call while I was sitting in the kitchen. The officer who approached the porch was calm and methodical in that way that good officers are unhurried, careful, clearly accustomed to walking into situations where several different versions of events were about to be presented to him at once. He looked at the gathered group, the documents, the open bag, the wooden box still in my son's hands, and I could see him taking quiet inventory. Her mother stepped forward immediately. "This is a family dispute that has been entirely blown out of proportion." The officer looked past her at me. "Is this your residence, ma'am?" "Yes," I said. "Did you give anyone permission to enter your home this evening?" "No." "Did you authorize any transfer of property ownership to any party?" "No." That word again. "No." I had spent so many years softening every boundary I had, choosing peace over clarity, calling silence kindness when it was really just fear of taking up too much space. That night on my own porch, that one word felt like putting something back where it belonged. The officer asked her mother to remain where she was. He asked Harold to produce the documents he had referenced. He asked my son to account for the recovered items. He did all of this with the quiet efficiency of someone who understood exactly what he was looking at. His fiancée stood slightly apart from her mother, and I watched the distance between them grow throughout that hour on the porch. At first she stood close, filling in her mother's answers with small additions. Then she went quiet. Then she took one physical step to the side. Then another. When the officer asked her mother directly about the folder and the wooden box, her mother said she had been holding them temporarily for safekeeping. His fiancée said nothing. When the officer noted that entering a residence without permission, regardless of intent, constituted unlawful entry, her mother began speaking about her attorney. His fiancée looked at the painted wooden box in my son's hands and covered her mouth with 2 fingers. "She took something that wasn't hers," my son said to his fiancée. Not accusing. Stating, "And you were going to let her?" His fiancée looked at him. Her eyes were wet. "I thought she was just going to look at the documents. I thought it was just papers. This belonged to my grandfather." He held up the box. "My mother has had it on that shelf for 23 years. You knew what it meant to her." She turned her face away. Her father, who had been silent at the restaurant and silent in the car, and silent every time I had watched him swallow something at a gathering where his wife was holding court, pulled up to the curb in his own vehicle 15 minutes into the conversation with the officer. He got out slowly. He looked at his wife, then at his daughter, then at my son, then at me. His expression was that of a man who had arrived somewhere he had known for a long time he would eventually have to go. He spoke to my son first. "I found out what she had planned 3 days ago. I should have come to you then. I'm sorry I didn't." His wife turned on him immediately. The officer calmly reminded her that she was not to interfere with other parties' statements. Her father looked at me next. "She told our daughter the property transfer was just smart family planning. She did not tell her the documents contained a forged signature. When I found that, I told Rachel she had to stop it." He looked at the porch. "She told me I was being dramatic." His fiancée Rachel, I thought. I had spent months trying to love a woman, and I had barely let myself use her name, pressed her hand harder against her mouth. "Did you know?" my son asked her, direct and quiet. "About the signature." The pause lasted 4 seconds. "I didn't know it was forged," she said. "I knew the documents were real. I thought she had gotten you to sign them at some point, or that she was going to ask you to. I didn't ask how." Her voice broke. "Because I didn't want to know." My son was very still. "That's not the same as not knowing," he said. She looked at him, and I saw on her face something I had not expected. Not just guilt, but grief. Real grief. The kind that comes when you finally understand what you traded away, and it is too late to trade back. "I know," she whispered. "The officer documented everything. The forged transfer, the unlawful entry, the recovered property. Harold provided copies of the documents he had obtained independently. Her mother's attorney, reached by phone, stopped speaking after approximately 90 seconds of conversation with Harold. Her mother was asked to accompany the officers for further questioning. She did so with her chin lifted and her mouth flat, the woman who had entered every room like she owned it, leaving mine for the last time. Her father stood at the end of the driveway for a while after the cars left. My son brought him a glass of water. He took it with both hands like someone who was not sure they deserved even that. "I kept the peace for too long," he said. "And what I called the peace wasn't peace. It was just waiting. I recognized that. I recognized every word of it. My son changed the locks that night. He called a locksmith, the officer recommended, and while they worked, I sat at the kitchen table with George's wooden box in my lap, lid open, the folded note from the day my son was born, still inside exactly where it had always been. He arrived at 6, 14 inches the morning, and made the whole room louder just by being in it. "I think we're going to be all right." George had written that while I was sleeping. I hadn't found it until after he died. I had read it approximately 300 times since then. My son sat across from me when the locksmith was finished. He had his hands around a coffee mug, and the look of someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time, and had finally set it down, though not without cost. "I thought I was protecting you by not telling you what I found," he said. "I thought if I could just handle it quietly, you wouldn't have to go through any of this. I thought the same thing every time I didn't tell you how her mother treated me," I said. He looked at his coffee. "We were both protecting each other straight into the middle of a disaster," I said. He gave a small sound that was almost a laugh. "Yeah." I put my hand over his on the table. His hands were so much like his father's it still surprised me sometimes. The same broad knuckles. The same way of holding things carefully. "I need you to hear something," I told him. "Not as my son, as yourself." He waited. "You acted with more integrity tonight than most people manage in a lifetime. You are not responsible for what she became, or what her mother planned. You can grieve this and still know that you did everything right." He looked at me for a long time. "I loved her," he said. "Simply. The way you say true things." "I know," I said. "That doesn't mean she was right for you. And loving someone who doesn't protect you is not the same as being loved." He nodded. His eyes were bright. "Your father would have done exactly what you did tonight," I said. "He would have stood up and walked out and changed every lock and sat here at this table drinking bad coffee at midnight. He would have been furious and heartbroken, and absolutely certain he did the right thing. Just like you." My son pressed his lips together for a moment. Then he said, "I miss him." "So do I said. "Every single day." We sat there until the coffee was gone, and the sky outside began to lighten in the faint way it does in the hour before dawn, when the dark doesn't leave all at once but softens slowly, the way most difficult things do. The months that followed were not simple. They rarely are when truth arrives with legal consequences in tow. The fraud case moved forward. The forged transfer documents were traced. Her mother's financial records came out in the process. The debt she had hidden. The business losses. The gap between the life she projected and the life she had actually built. Her father filed for divorce. Rachel cooperated fully with investigators. She was not charged as the primary actor, but she faced her own accounting in ways I chose not to follow closely. I updated my legal documents with an attorney I chose myself. I had a proper estate plan drawn up for the first time. I added motion-sensitive lights to the front and back of the house. I joined a book group that met on Thursday evenings at the public library and turned out to be full of women who had also spent too many years making themselves smaller than they were. I placed George's wooden box back on the study shelf. Beside it, I put a small card with his handwriting on it, the line I had kept folded in my wallet for 4 years. "I think we're going to be all right. I still believe him." My son came for dinner every Sunday. In time, he laughed again. Not the same as before. Grief changes the sound of laughter slightly, gives it a weight it didn't used to carry, but real. True. One evening in late November, he stood at my kitchen window watching the oak tree in the backyard lose the last of its leaves and said, "I think I was afraid that if I saw what was real, I'd have to give something up." "You did have to give something up," I said. "Yeah." He turned around. "But I didn't give up you." If you have ever been a mother, you know that some sentences your children say will live in you longer than almost anything else. That was one of them. There is a version of this story where I stayed quiet, where I smiled at the restaurant and laughed off the bread comment, and let the green folder sit in that drawer until the right papers arrived and the right signatures were gathered, and I woke up one morning wondering how my own home had slipped out from under me while I was busy trying not to be a burden. That is the version I almost lived. What I know now, that I did not fully know before, is this: silence that protects the wrong people does not become peace just because it is quiet. The small cruelties that wear family clothing are still cruelty. And a home is not just a property. It is everything you built with someone you loved, and you are allowed to protect it, loudly, without apology, for as long as it stands. I still sit on the front porch sometimes on Sunday evenings, in the rocking chair that used to be George's, watching the neighborhood settle down for the night. It feels different than it did before all of this, more deliberate, more mine. The oak tree in the back drops its leaves every fall, and comes back every spring without any help from anyone. I find that comforting. I think we're going to be all right.